Hi, welcome to the AFI interview series. I'm Scott Cardis and I'm here with Raymond, CEO of Xyland. Raymond, can you tell us about your business and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So for me, my name is Raymond Chetti. I was born in Daejeon, South Korea, but I was adopted to New York, an Italian-American family in New York when I was 1. I grew up all my life in New York, Long Island. I didn't really get to embrace my Korean culture until I went to college at SUNY Buffalo, and that's when I could start meeting Korean friends who got me interested in learning more about my own heritage. And in 2008, that's when I came back to Korea for the first time. I studied at Korea University as an exchange student. It was one of the most transformative semesters of my life. That's when I could actually see Seoul city planning. For me, I studied city planning in college. So growing up in the States, studying about city planning in the States, and then coming to Asia for the first time, let alone South Korea, it was amazing to see how Seoul in South Korea developed and the amazing story behind it and how quickly it developed. So for me, I knew I wanted to come back to South Korea, not just to study, but to really work and see how I could contribute to the development of Seoul, this amazing city that I love being here for. Mm-hmm. So I came back to Seoul in 2011, and I didn't know I was going to do Xyland from 2011. I got into a real estate development consulting company called Thomas Consultants, and that's when I could actually see what kind of data related to real estate was available in South Korea. For example, the Korean census, the locations of amenities, and I was analyzing all this data every day for several years. And then in 2015, I was meeting senior Rotarians who actually asked me, Ray, can you help me sell my property? And that's when I could actually see the problem that our startup, Xyland, is looking to solve. I noticed that there were huge discrepancies between the price of real estate from those who actually owned it to those who wanted to actually purchase it. And so I noticed that the cost of doing an appraisal to validate the true market price of real estate was completely out of reach from those who wanted to negotiate a deal. And that's when I had the idea for Xyland. Why can't there be an affordable, quick, and easy way to validate the price using authoritative data? And that was December 2017. So our company, Xyland, we strive to be the one and only source of authoritative real estate data relating to valuations in Asia, starting with South Korea.
Oh, wow. So how do you get this data?
So how do we get the data? So luckily, for me, in my past experience, that's when I could actually see which data sources were available in South Korea. And when I was doing it manually, I had to download all of the Excel files from A, B, and C different sources, and it took me a lot of time. But then when I had the idea for a company in 2017, December, that's when I started seeing a lot of news, a lot of articles, AI, data science. And it got me really curious and excited that there were actually methods to automate these data gathering processes that would actually make it feasible to analyze large amounts of data. And so for me, because I've been able to identify which data sources are of most relevance to the valuations of real estate here in Korea, I've been lucky enough to find amazing team members who have helped automate that process for us.
You mentioned price. Like there's a gap between the price that a person wants to sell at and the price that people can afford. Can you expand on that more? Is that like one of the biggest barriers to purchasing a new apartment or home for young people in Korea?
Right. So I'm often caught in the middle. Well, in my past experience when I was working to help a real estate broker, I often found it was a little bit of both, Scott. Pretty much at the time when we had to validate the prices of the properties we were working on, it was impossible to gather all this data and do it in a timely fashion to get everybody on the same page. So that's the market opportunity that I see for our company. We hope to bring both parties to the table using this set of authoritative data that we're gathering to tell the story of why this property is what it is, based on how large it is, what amenities are nearby, what new planned projects are located nearby. So in terms of helping the the potential buyers understand why is this property valued what it is. We hope that's what our platform hopes to help answer.
So that kind of brings into my question. You know, housing prices in Seoul are one of the topics of the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's in the news every day. There's a new article or new something talking about why people can't afford housing. And I was seeing some prices at like 900 million won. How can a young couple overcome these housing prices to get their own place and not have to live with their parents if they really want to move out and start a family?
Right. This is a topic that many of my real estate seniors have spoken to me about. And for me, as a foreigner, still learning every day about Korea, it's interesting to hear their feedback. So I understand that the current administration, they're really trying to help young people afford new houses. However, based on the data that we're seeing, it's having the opposite effect as of now. Prices are actually increasing significantly. One example and one reason why is because I heard that one of the regulations actually allow banks to provide higher mortgages to those seeking to buy an apartment. But because of that, homeowners, they read the news as well. They know that banks are providing more money to potential home buyers. So therefore, asking prices increase as well. So like I said, I feel like the administration is trying to do good for the public. It's just not having that effect right now.
Oh, wow. So when we think about like housing in Korea, there's several different types. The jeonse style,
Yes,
and the wolse or more monthly, traditional Western style monthly rent. Jeonse is typically touted as like the one that everyone in Korea wants to get, right? And jeonse means you don't pay rent, but you have an obscenely high deposit. Normally in America, if I put a $900,000 down on a house or something, that's a $9 million valuation for that property. If I'm not mistaken, a 10% mortgage. But then I own it. In Korea, I don't own it, right? I just, it's like a rent. What do you think that effect is having on things, like having such a high cost of just to get a regular apartment that everyone wants to get? Do you think people should switch to wolse? Do you think jeonse is still the way to go?
So there's quite a lot of literature, and especially real estate professionals around me think that now is the time that the Korean real estate market is going to transition away from jeonse to more kind of the Western style, wolse and monthly rent. However, one really interesting thing that I've been seeing through new real estate developments from seniors of mine who have actually put out new developments, there's a shift from the traditional, just regular office towels to more co-living kind of developments that have shared spaces. So even though that this whole concept of wolse and maybe like one room is kind of a little bit, it's not premium here in Korea, there are real estate developers that are trying to cater to that, 20s, 30s, young professionals market, while still trying to provide them an affordable but still very premium place to live that is based off a wolse model, which is very interesting.
Now, one of the things everyone talks about too, and this is relevant to housing, is the birth rate in Korea. And people just aren't having kids. And one of the biggest reasons I keep seeing is the fact that, the people can't get housing. People can't afford it. Do you think that the housing prices are causing a negative effect on the birth rate in Korea?
I think the birth rate issue, there's many different reasons for that. Housing could definitely play a role in that because it is extremely high here. But I do feel the issue is more so related to the schools and possibly education system. Because whenever I speak to those who are just beginning to start their families, like a very good friend of mine in my Rotary Club, one of the huge questions that they ask is, where should my son or daughter go to school? And that question of schooling always comes to the forefront of every single conversation that I have been a part of. Housing, not so much, but I'm not going to disagree and say housing is cheap in Korea.
Because most people, for example, jeonse, you finance it with a loan, you mentioned. do people also self-finance? Like, do people have that much capital lying around?
Not usually. No, they usually go to a bank and take out a loan. Yes, that's actually the work that we're looking to help banks with right now. When banks give out loans on different apartment and maybe villa units, they need to understand what the value is of that before they give out the loan. So that's the database that we've developed right now.
Well, that's about all I have for you. Thank you very much. You did very. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for watching this interview with Raymond Chetti, CEO of Xyland, and talking about housing in Seoul and South Korea. I hope you learned something, and I hope you tune in for the next 3 episodes.